Greetings hobbyists, this is Artisans of All, and in this video we're going to create some assets that are going to be useful in creating weapons using some of the standard tools in Blender. So in the last video we had a look at how to make this series of less detailed and more detailed ammunition. If you're a beginner to Blender you might want to check those videos out, as they introduce most of the tools that we're going to be using today, and we're going to be creating these flamethrower fuel canisters, and I was requested to show how to make a plasma cell and a fusion cell. And for those we're going to use, again, these standard tools, but we will add one tool that does come with Blender in inverted commas, but either way it is free and we'll go through that as we come to it. So let's start with the flamer canisters. So if I just bring in another cylinder, I'm going to up this to 128 vertices as these are going to be a lot bigger, move this over here and let's just scale that up to, let's say, somewhere about there. This needs to be bigger. You'll notice that again our scale has been changed. It is the same on every single axis, so for example in edge mode if I select here and Control and B it will bevel fine without any problems or exaggeration in one direction, but it's still good practice to Control and A and apply the scale. And actually I'm going to S and Z that up a little bit, so we need to Control and A and apply the scale anyway. Now for these edges, so we're going to select that edge and that edge, I'm going to bevel these and we're going to use a slightly different option. So if I Control and B, I'm just going to focus on this, but do notice it is going to bevel both of these at the same time. If we come here and Control and B, we can make a nice rounded bevel, and I'm going to up this so it's really nice and smooth. We've got the segments in the top left hand corner, and 32 is probably about fine. But I don't quite like this rounding. So this has a shape of 0.5. I actually want to change this. Now if you don't have this menu, it's in the bottom left hand corner, so it sometimes will be smaller. You can just click on this and use this once you've finished an operation, and we can change our shape here. This will change the shape of our profile, so you can actually get something where you're nearly perfectly flat anyway. I'm going to down this slightly. Now the reason that's not is because this is not a multiple of 2, so let's put that to 32, and then we're just going to drag this down, but I want to go somewhere about here. Let's type in 0.6. So I think that looks much better, and it's a slightly more interesting and gradually curving shape. You can also still change the width here if you want to. I'm quite happy with the width where it is. Then we're going to add some detailing around the side. So Control and R again to bring in that edge loop. Either right click or press Escape to bring it to the middle. Control and B, scroll all the way down, drag to the point where we want our detailing. So I'm going to be making an edge. Oh, let's go into face mode. So a sticking out portion here and here, just for some detailing. Alt and E again to extrude faces along normals and drag that out slightly to, let's say, there. And I think that will look good. Now, if you get to the point where you look at this and think, actually, I think I want this a little bit further, it's not good practice to Alt and E and extrude faces along normals again and make an extra loop. You can do, but if you do that, you want to get rid of that loop at some point. What I'll do instead is press Alt and S, and that allows you to scale. It's actually called shrink or flatten, but it basically means you're scaling along the normals of the object. So it allows you to add more to that process. So let's go to about there. Then I'm going to go into edge mode and importantly select that edge, that edge, that edge, and this edge. We could leave this flat, but I actually want to add in a bevel to it. So I'm going to Control and B and drag to about there, I think. So we've got this rounded edge. Now, once I click, we'll see this still maintains its shape of 0.6, which actually I don't want. I want it to be more rounded. So let's put this back to 0.5, which is the normal value. There we go. So that is our flame canister. Now I'm actually going to make a slightly different shaped one that's more based off a sort of alien style design. So let's Shift A, mesh, and bring in a cylinder, G and then Y, it's still on 128 vertices. Let's S to scale this up so it's about the same width, S and then Z, and then we're going to do a slightly different shape one. Let's Control and A and apply the scale. I'm going to go into edge mode, Control and R there. Let's go to about here, Control and R somewhere there. I'm going to go into edge mode, or face mode actually for this. I'm just going to scale that in, so to about there, and then E to bring that up. And we'll do the same thing here, so I'm going to scale this in to somewhere about there. In fact, actually, what I'm going to do is just demonstrate something. So what I'm going to do is alt click on that edge and I'm going to press Ctrl and X to dissolve that edge, which will just get rid of it without deleting it. You could also, if you want to do this another way, press X and then click to dissolve edges, not to delete them. So once we do that, if I alt click that edge here, what I can do is Ctrl and bevel, scroll down, and this is going to have the same effect. But what I want to do is round out each of these edges. So I'm going to alt click, shift and alt click there, and then shift and alt click here. And then I'm going to press Ctrl and B and just round those out slightly. Let's go to somewhere like there. I think that would look good. And then we'll alt select this one and we'll round this a little bit more. So Ctrl and B again, and I want that to be a bit more rounded like that. So there we go. That's our alternative flamethrower canister. And if we feel that this needs something where it's going to connect to it, I could press I and then E if we want to. Something like that. So we've got our flamethrower canister there. The final tool that we're going to use is the only one that I would argue is slightly more complex, but it's relatively easy to think through. It's also very easy to get if you've got Blender 4.2, and it's still relatively easy if you're working on one of the older versions of Blender as well. So let's Shift A and mesh and bring in another cylinder again. We're going to G and then Y that across, and then we're going to once again scale it up. So we're going to go somewhere here, and we're going to make something like a plasma cell. Now for this, it's going to be a relatively simple task. All I'm going to do is go into face mode, select these two faces, and let's use our scale tool in a slightly different way. So I'm going to I, and we're going to inset both of them to about there. Then we're going to S to just scale this up. Now you'll notice that it gets larger on all axes, so it will get wider. I don't want that, so I'm just going to press Z. So we're just moving on the Z axis to create this sort of shape. Then I'm going to press I again to inset. You'll notice this is doing this on the bottom at the same time. So inset it slightly, and then I'm going to press Alt and E and use our extrude long normals to stick out just a little bit, somewhere like there. Good. So this is making our plasma cell. Finally, I want some detailing around the edge. Let's bring in a cube so we can demonstrate what we're doing. That's G and then Y that over here. And what we're going to do is just Shift and D and Y to create a duplicate of this. Now for this we're going to use an add-on because we're going to be creating an array and we want this array to rotate around this cube. Now this used to be something that you could only do with paid for add-ons or with some fiddling around. It's now become a lot simpler if you go to Edit and Preferences, and you'll need to click Get Extensions if you're in Blender 4.2 or beyond, and you're going to come down to where it says ND, and you're going to install it. Now I've already got it installed so that it doesn't have this, but if you come to my available ones, there's an install button there. Click that and it will become available. Then go to your add-ons box and then come down to where it says ND and just make sure it's activated. So click that box, save your preferences. If you're not using Blender 4.2, you're just going to have to go to Gumroad and get it. It's still free and you'll just need to install it as you'd normally install an add-on. Now ND is an add-on that adds lots of different options. If I click this object, shift click on this, if I press shift and 2, we then get a load of options, including the replicate option, and we want a circular array. So if I click on circular array, it creates an array around that central object, and I can move myself or my mouse left and right, and it will change the amount that there are. And then once you're happy with your amount, you just click and you've got that there. So really useful tool. Now we're going to use this now to create some detailing around the outside, and I want some bits sticking out from this. So let's bring in a cube. You'll see what we're doing in a second. G and then Y, and we want this to line up with this object. Now there's a lot of ways of doing this. The simplest way is just decide that, well, the central origin of this is on this Y-axis, so I'm just going to click Control and C, and then I'm just going to come to this object, and then in my location, notice this is in the item menu, I can click Control and V, hit enter, and then now in the same place. If you do decide you're interested in some add-ons, things like machine tools, it's even easier. You just click the object, shift click, press Alt and A, and you'll see that that's gone to that centered location. So I'll just do that one more time. So click, shift click, Alt and A, and it's now in the middle. So that's a really useful option. We're going to stick in X-ray mode, and just with that cube, I'm going to press Z and come to the top, and then G, and then X that out to somewhere about here, just so it's sticking out a bit. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, somewhere there. Could always do this more. And I'm going to S and Z to make this quite large. Let's go with somewhere about there. Control and A and apply the scale, because it's always good practice. And then we'll shift click. And then we're going to use our circular array, but there's going to be a problem. Now let me just explain this problem, just so it doesn't happen to you. If I shift and 2 and then circular array, so replicate circular array, you can see we've ended up with this tiny little circle, which is all the way here. Now the reason for this is because while we remembered to apply the scaling to this object, we didn't to this. So it's going to make it, or our duplicate, 10.067 times smaller. So let's Control and A and apply the scale, and we'll do that again. So Shift and 2, replicate circular array, and you'll notice we now don't have a problem. I can just scroll this to wherever I want it to. Let's go to about here, click, and we've got our plasma cell. We are going to need to Boolean this together. We do want this to be one object, not several, and the simplest way to do that is using our modifier menu. So I'm going to come to my modifier menu here, because we've got two objects joined together. So click. You won't have this old modifier menu. It's what gives us the old style of menu. I think this is really nice. It's a free add-on. It's on Gumroad. If I just click add modifier and type in Boolean, we get our Boolean. I want to have a union Boolean, and I want to union with this. So let's, now that we've done that, we can H to hide this, and we've got our object. Now, if we want this to continue working, for example, if I press G, this is going to move it apart from the other object. You can either apply so that you've got this permanently done, or if you want to stop that happening, we can use the final tool that we're going to look at, which is if I bring in a cube, let's bring that over here, and then Shift and D. Now, I'm not sure we'd call this a tool, but it is very helpful. If I want to be able to move one object and then the other object moves with it, what I can do is select the object that I want to be moving. We'll call this the child, and then shift click on the object that we want to be the one in control. We call this the parent. I'm going to press Control and P and select parent to object. What that means now is we get this dotted line that says that it's in existence. And now if I press G and move it around, the other one moves with it. Notice if we select the child and move it, it doesn't move the parent, because children like to run away. And then G, this one moves. So our parent likes to stay with our child doesn't always want to stay with the parent. Though, to be fair, I'm not sure that was an entirely accurate description of a child-parent relationship. So here, what we're going to do is find our cube, which is up here, make it visible, so we can click on just the cube, shift-click on the object that we want to parent it to, that we're going to keep visible, Control and P, object, and we're going to just hide that cube. So I'm going to click here, press H, and now if I move this, they both move together. Finally, I'm just going to show a sped up version of making this fusion cell. It's basically the same skills that we've used to make the flame canister, with the addition of this circular array from ND. So it's a relatively simple thing to do once you've mastered these skills. But I think all of these objects together are a really nice demonstration piece of what you can do with relatively simplistic tools in Blender, as long as you know and think through how to use them. And as I've said before, while on the channel I try to show you through a lot of different things that are going to be more complicated to do in Blender, in reality, it's these tools that make up probably 90% of most people's work. Finally, what this will allow us to do is save these objects potentially into our asset browser. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the asset browser, but if I come down to, I don't know, let's say some Roman numerals, the asset browser is somewhere where we can save objects and just drag and drop them in, and then we get that object. For example, that's the Roman numeral 3 or 13, and I designed those earlier. There's a link in the description on the video of how to use the asset browser. It's a really handy tool because it means that we can save all of these ammunition types and just bring them into any object that we want. If you don't want to bother creating this yourself, or you just want an easy way of getting these, or you just want to have a look at them, this file is going to be available on the Patreon. There's a couple of tiers there. One where you get these videos a week ahead of time and ad-free and help support the channel, and another tier where you get all the 3D files that I'm creating and demonstrating on these videos, as well as some other things as well. Have a great day, guys.